What if I told you that the greatest empire the world had ever seen before Rome? Before Alexander was born, not from war, but from whispers, not from cities, but from dust, ... and silence. Not a single sword had yet been raised, and yet was stirring beneath the soil of Central Asia like embers waiting for breath. Hidden behind walls of stone and time, far from the rivers of Egypt or the palaces of Babylon, a people emerged. They called themselves Arya, the noble ones. But they were not yet kings. They were horsemen, herders, migrants, and they were about to forge an empire that would challenge the gods themselves. It did not begin with banners. It began with hooves, with footsteps, with silence. Around 1000 BCE, Indo-Iranian tribes moved south, wave after wave, crossing into the great Iranian plateau. These were not warriors from some capital city. They were travelers of the wind, shepherds of flocks, families in search of land, of water, of survival. The plateau that greeted them was no paradise. Towering mountains cut the sky open like blades. Salt deserts stretched endlessly, shimmering like mirages. It was a land of contradiction, violent drought, and sudden fertility. And it tested them. They did not carve borders with blades, but with endurance. Their kingdom was not yet land. It was motion. Between hunger and horizon, they learned the one rule of the plateau: survive, or be swallowed. In this unforgiving land, survival bred innovation where rivers could not reach. They created qanats, underground tunnels that captured water from the mountains and guided it to thirsty fields. These ancient aqueducts, carved with bare hands and vision, turned deserts into gardens. Some still flow today. Theirs was a civilization born from stone, sweat, and silence. They refused to bow to geography. Instead, they rewrote it. By the 8th century BCE, these scattered peoples had become two powers to the northwest. Near the Caspian Sea and Zagros Mountains rose the Medes, pasturelands, cavalry, fortified towns. Herodotus would write of their capital, Ecbatana, wrapped in 7 colored walls, each layer a different hue: blue, red, silver, and finally gold to the south. In harsher, drier lands were the Parsa, later known as the Persians. Scattered, water-bound, fiercely tribal, masters of dry farming and survival. Their isolation protected them, and in that solitude, they forged a deeper identity, one that would wait and watch. These were not yet empires. They were embers quiet and waiting. But to the west loomed a shadow, Assyria, an empire of iron, of fire, of terror. Cities were burned, captives skinned, the sky blackened by smoke, The Assyrians did not conquer, they devoured. When they rode of the Medes or the Persians, it was not as neighbors. It was as targets. They came with iron spears and the promise of extinction. But under this threat, something stirred among the Medes. Alliances began to form. Tribes merged. Walls rose. A leader appeared, Dioses, part myth, part king. Herodotus claimed he built the first Median kingdom. He ruled not just with arms, but with order, with law. He created a court, a capital. For the first time, the Medes were more than tribes. They were becoming a state. Then came the moment the world thought impossible. In 612 BCE, the Medes allied with the Babylonians. Together, they marched on the beast, Nineveh, capital of the Assyrian Empire. The city fell, and with it, the oldest terror the world had ever known vanished in ash and stone. The Medes claimed the north. The Babylonians claimed the south. But in the highlands of Pars, the Persians watched, still quiet, still, underestimated, while kings and cities rose and fell. A fire lit in the soul of a man. A prophet walked the mountain trails, hearing voices, not of men, but of divinity. His name was Zarathustra. He brought a dangerous idea that the world was not ruled by capricious gods, but by two forces: Ahura Mazda, Lord of truth and light, and Angra Mainyu, spirit of darkness and chaos, and that humans, not priests, not kings, would decide the outcome. He spoke not from temples, but from solitude, from wind-scoured ridges and flame-lit caves. He wasn't sent by men. He wasn't believed by them either. But the fire he carried, it burned into kings. This was the birth of Zoroastrianism, a religion that would outlive empires and whisper its way into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It gave kings a new purpose, not just to rule, but to protect order in a universe of chaos. Then, in the land of Pars, a boy was born. His name was Cru. The Greeks would call him Cyrus. Legend says his grandfather, the Median king, Astyages, dreamed the boy would one day overthrow him. He ordered the infant killed, but the executioner betrayed the order. The child was left with a shepherd, raised in secret. Either way, story begins the same, with blood in the snow, a knife that never fell, and a child meant to die, who instead would make the world kneel. Cyrus became king of Anshan, a minor vassal of the Medes. But in 550 BCE, he rose in rebellion. The world expected his defeat. Instead, Cyrus shattered the Median army. He took Ecbatana, did not burn it. He did not enslave the Medes. He absorbed them. Two peoples became one. A new force had risen, not just a kingdom, but an idea, an empire. The ancient world stood on four legs: Media, Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. None feared the Persians, but that would change. Cyrus turned west. Lydia struck first. Under the Golden King Croesus, Cyrus struck back harder. In winter, when armies never marched, he invaded. He used camels to scatter the enemy cavalry, their scent panicking the horses. He seized Sardis. Lydia was gone. Then he turned to Babylon. The great city stood behind mighty walls, but its people had grown weary of their king. Cyrus diverted the Euphrates River, and in the night his army waited beneath Babylon's walls. No battering rams, no fire. The river slipped like a whisper beneath Babylon's mighty gates. No blood, no resistance, just silence. And then the footfall of destiny. The priests hailed him as Marduk's chosen. He restored temples. He returned exiles. He set the Jews free to rebuild Jerusalem. His words, carved on a clay cylinder, still echo. I did not pillage. I brought peace. This was no ordinary conqueror. Where others ruled by fear, Cyrus ruled by respect. He did not erase cultures. He protected them. He did not silence gods. He honored them. He became a king, not just of Persia, but of peoples. His empire stretched from the Indus to the Aegean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf. And yet, it had only just begun to be continued.